Hey, I've got to follow up on the food supply chain and also a bunch about Flynn and then just a couple other things I felt like you needed to know. So stick with me. I'll be back in a minute. Hey everybody, this is Deb with Truthification Chronicles, and wow, I started getting into all this stuff and I actually spent more time digging and looking and reading and everything than I should have because it's kind of late now, so I hope I don't mess up too much, but I want to get this out there and let you see what's going on. So I'm recording this on Tuesday night, the 28th. Anyway, so let's start out first of all with a little bit more on the whole food supply chain thing, because remember in my last video I told you about the Tyson Foods and that they were shutting things down, and then they put this big article, this ad in the paper, the New York Times, and we're going to run out of food. Oh no, what will we do? And so I just want to reassure you here that yes, it's true that meat packers like Tyson Foods are intensely disrupted by COVID-19. Social distancing is tough in these facilities, and some plants have closed temporarily due to outbreaks. Now, I was talking to my dad about this, and he said that, when you're in those, like the chicken factory especially, they have them like side by side. These people are right next to each other. And again, as I said in the previous video, there is a tendency for there to be more Hispanics that are working in that plant. I'm not saying all. I'm just saying that usually those kinds of plants have a higher rate of Hispanics than normal for that particular area. And so if you know anything about Hispanics, a lot of times they're very close-knit with their families. And so it's very probable that a lot of them have people that, they're very close to, their families are very close. And, it could be that some of it's being transmitted that way too. So anyway, it says we're tracking U.S. plant closures and reopenings here. And this particular group, the Counter here, it's a nonprofit newsroom investigating the forces shaping how and what America eats. So that's who they are. They don't have a blue check, but it sounds like they are kind of keeping tabs on things. And so they're mapping these closures, and they've got some dots on here. They don't have the ones, the Indiana one here. But while plant closures may lead to temporary meat shortages, the system is not likely to break down despite the severity of current challenges. And there's a lot of links here. And it says, first, there is no shortage of meat destined for the grocery store shelf. It might take stores longer than usual to restock certain products due to supply chain disruptions, but we have many millions of pounds of meat in cold storage across the nation. So this is something to remember too. Case in point, pork loins in cold storage reached an all-time high this year, nearly 50 million pounds, the most since records started to be kept in 1960. These frozen stockpiles will make up for any lost processing capacity in the short term. Workers face real fear for their health and safety. As long as that's true, current slaughter capacity will be limited. The cost of labor will rise, and eventually retail prices will too. So, you be aware of that. That is definitely true. Right now, there is no lack of animals to process. With plants closed, farmers and ranchers have fewer markets to sell into. So the slaughterhouses that remain open are likely to see supply gluts. Then there's the tangled logistics. There's plenty of meat on hand that was headed to restaurants and commercial food service. It'll take some time for meat packers to convert bulk products into portion sizes the general public can work with. Because usually when they sell them to, the restaurant chains or whatever, they're selling them in much larger quantities than they would to a consumer. We've reported on too big to pivot issues in the grain, dairy, and produce industries too. It's a vulnerability laid bare by this pandemic. Huge top-down supply chains may be ruthlessly efficient, but they're not nimble. And that is a real problem there because they can't really adapt. They're not flexible enough to adapt sometimes because these larger chains tend to have everything, very mechanical and in line. And again, I mentioned in a previous video that they want these, say hogs, for example, they want them certain size. And I don't know exactly why that is, but it probably has to do with their machines set up for that size, their whole processing line all set up for that size of animal, and probably because that's the optimum that they can get them, at that point. Sometimes when you're raising animals, there comes a point where you're putting more food into the animal than you're going to gain back in actual meat value or whatever, price that you're going to sell them at. So, most farmers want to get them to the point where they're just ready to go, and anything over that, you're kind of wasting feed. So, anyway, but that's what they're talking about here. Smaller businesses have different vulnerabilities, and while they face challenges too, some have managed to pivot quickly enough to keep product on the shelves. And that is an advantage that we have, that not everything is tied up in the big chains, that there are smaller ones out there too that are also doing work. It's distressing to see big meat packers in flux because just 4 of them dominate 80% of the supply chain. But they're not the entire supply chain. Hang-ups at the largest, most crowded plants don't mean the whole system is in trouble. This 80% here is interesting to me because when I was looking at that Smithfield plant, it was talking about their production, and they were like the largest pork producer in the United States, and it was only 5%. So, I don't know, maybe some of my statistics were off or something, but that's what I thought it was. And so companies like Tyson have been hit hard by COVID-19, but they are also powerful with plenty of cash and vast warehouses of frozen meat on hand. They may be struggling now, but they have the political, financial, and infrastructural resources they'll need to survive. So just wanted to give you that. And I think they make sense with it, that this is likely the situation that we have, that there is food out there. It is going to happen. And President Trump has actually taken a step to make sure that the safety of our nation's food supply chain continues. And here is a press release that went to the press pool. And they're saying President Donald J. Trump is taking action to ensure the safety of our nation's food supply chain. We're working very hard to make sure our food supply chain is sound and plentiful. And then here are the steps that he's taking. So you can go through and read these if you want to have a little more assurance of what's going on. And so they're trying to make sure that, these different markets can continue, and that people will have what they need during this time. So this is all the different steps that he's been taking. What really gets me is the press gets this. I mean, this goes directly to the press. So it's not like they don't know he's taking these steps. And then they come back at these stupid briefings and they say, well, you're not doing anything. Just, frustrating. And then here's about the executive order on delegating authority under the DPA with respect to food supply chain resources during the national emergency. So this is the executive order if you want to read through it. Okay? And I'll leave the links to all these down below. Remember, they're in the description, so you'll have to click a little triangle or something if you're on a mobile device. And you can find it down there. I want to play you just a short little clip here. This is Sidney Powell on Lou Dobbs. And she has a new book out, by the way, called Conviction Machine, Standing Up to Federal Prosecutorial Abuse. So sounds good. Sounds like a good one to me. Anyway, so here it is.
Prosecutorial abuse, available everywhere. We recommend it to you highly. Sidney, great to have you with us. Straightforwardly, did the government, and most specifically the FBI officials and Justice Department officials under the Obama administration, did they frame General Flynn?
Yes, sir, they did. There's no doubt about it. August 15, Strzok and Page texted each other about the insurance policy they discussed in McCabe's office. The very next day, they opened the quote, investigation, end quote, on General Flynn. And the day after that, as we just learned from the IG report in December, they sent an agent into what was supposed to be a trusted presidential briefing solely because General Flynn was going to be there and they wanted to collect information on him, gauge his mannerisms in the event they needed to interview him later, i.e., as in Trump was elected to the presidency and Flynn wound up in the White House.
So I wanted to share that with you because I think it's very important for us to understand that, she's seen the evidence and she knows for sure that that's what happened. So things are starting to come out. And this is an article, by the way, the Gateway Pundit. There's no doubt about it. And so that's what it is. And that's where you can find that. But Sarah Carter also has something because, you see, later on in that particular interview with Sidney Powell, she says that this Covington and Burling, which were the lawyers that Flynn started out with, the ones that did not help him out, and I think were working for the deep state on this, but they turned over, supposedly a while back, they were supposed to turn over all of the documents that they had concerning Flynn to Sidney Powell so she could work on his defense and everything. Well, then, of course, now they turn over another bunch of documents. And I think she said in that interview, 17,000 pages of documents, or 17,000 documents. I think it was 17,000 pages. But, wow, 17, right? Anyway, they just have more that they're bringing out all of a sudden. It's like, oh, surprise, guess what? We found these. Yeah, right. So you didn't have them before. So this was last week. Another batch of documents withheld by former special counsel Robert Mueller's team on Flynn was turned over to his defense that allegedly reveals that the retired three-star general did not commit any crimes. So once again, we know. And then the judge now has ordered the Covington and Burling to execute another search for documents since they just came out with all these. And it's like, do it again, guys. You need to go back and make sure you've got everything. And I think the deadline on this was May 4th. So they have to turn them over by then. I don't know what this Emmett Sullivan is doing. I really don't. He should right now, with everything that he's been presented with, he should just say, this was garbage. This was not done fairly. They didn't follow the rules. They haven't been dealing with this Brady evidence. They haven't been turning it over. And especially with Emmett Sullivan, he should be really pushing for this whole Brady evidence. Now, the Brady evidence is evidence that will exonerate the person who's being accused. And the government is required to turn that over to the defense, but they haven't been doing that. And so it does exist, but Sidney Powell can't get it. And she knows these documents exist, but they haven't been forthcoming. And this is not unusual, especially for people like Van Grack and basically Andrew Weissman, who was kind of running the whole Mueller thing. And so this is how they work. They just don't turn over all the evidence. And then later on, after the person's been, convicted of something, then it kind of leaks out or whatever. It's just not the way it's supposed to work. That isn't how the government is set up. When our federal government goes after somebody to prosecute them, they really do have kind of the advantage because 95% of the people that they prosecute will be convicted. So it is kind of like they have the upper hand on this. And so they are supposed to do that. And years ago, Judge Emmett Sullivan was part of a proceeding having to do with Senator Ted Stevens. And if you're not familiar with that, Louis Gohmert wrote a 40-some page document that talked about all these different reasons why Mueller should never have been in charge of any investigation. And I did a series on him. And one of the people Louis Gohmert talked about in that document was Ted Stevens and this whole Emmett Sullivan thing, because this was back when Mueller was the head of the FBI, and they pretty much made up a case against Ted Stevens, and it ended up being right around the time he was supposed to be up for re-election. And he was, at the time, the longest running Republican senator in the Senate. And, of course, they convicted him, and then a few days later, all of a sudden, this comes out that they hadn't turned over Brady evidence, and there was a whistleblower involved that exposed this all. Judge Emmett Sullivan, overturned the case and everything. So, anyway, you can watch that video if you want to, but it explains it all. But that's why this guy right here, of all people, he should be really coming down on these Van Grack and the other lawyers that were working for Mueller who have not been turning over this Brady evidence, because it's very important for them to do that. Well, Catherine Herridge had this, and she said, drawing attention Friday filing Flynn case, CBS News told important for days ahead. AG Barr directed Missouri U.S. Attorney to review FBI personnel communications and notes, in part to determine whether key evidence withheld. Docs under seal but may change. And here was one of the documents, and it says it's to Sidney Powell here, and says, beginning in January 2020, at the direction of Attorney General William P. Barr, the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Missouri has been conducting a review of the Michael T. Flynn investigation. The review by USA EDMO has involved the analysis of reports related to the investigation, along with communications and notes by Federal Bureau of Investigation personnel associated with the investigation. And then the enclosed documents were obtained and analyzed by USA EDMO in March and April 2020 and are provided to you as a result of this ongoing review. Additional documents may be forthcoming. These materials are covered by the protective order entered by the court on February 21st, 2018. And then here's another part of it, that there's a notice of discovery correspondence. And again, it's the same thing here. The United States of America, by and through its attorney, the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia, hereby files the court its most recent discovery correspondence in this case. So it is getting out there, and notice it does say most recent discovery. Those are her notes, I guess. But so there's that, and then this is another article about it. Newly revealed docs support Flynn's innocence, case against him should be tossed. And this is by Gregg Jarrett. It really does kind of go through some of the things that have been coming up and why Flynn should never, ever have been charged with anything. And so I agree with him down here. He says, new court documents finally handed over to Flynn's lawyer contain exculpatory evidence that has been long sought, yet concealed until now. The charge against him should be dismissed. Then he should sue the very people in government that persecuted him under the pretext of a legitimate prosecution. Boy, I think so too. So there's been a lot of solidarity among his siblings because, he's from a really big family, really big Catholic family, Flynn is, and he, was a lieutenant general, which is a 3-star general. So his siblings have been putting up 3 stars on Twitter lately. So anyway, I'll put all the links to these down below and you can go through them. Here's one last one by Margot Cleveland. And she says that Sidney Powell confirms that following redactions, DOJ and Powell will enter a consent order for the unsealing of Exhibit 3, which is the recently discovered by outside U.S. attorneys and turned over FBI material related to Flynn. So all of this is happening, and you might want to keep an eye on Undercover Huber because he kind of puts out some very important things. So this is what's going on, and it is just such a travesty that Sidney Powell is not a blue check yet. They don't even think it's worth giving her a blue check. But then again, they don't give one to Margot Cleveland either. And she writes for the Federalist. She does a really good job. And then there's this article that I wanted to share with you, because there's this leaked video from the Pentagon, and it's a briefing that was on how brains, a religious brain and a non-religious brain, can react to certain things, and that they can affect it and change behavior to take someone from being a, as they call it, religious fanatic to a non-religious brain. And it's a little scary. It's from 4/13/05, and it lasts 5 minutes or something like that. So this definitely something that I think it would be well worth your time to watch. So I'll leave the link down below, and I'm not going to go into all the details on it, but it does say it's being shared as a Pentagon presentation by, guess who? Bill Gates. So there you go. Little kind of weird. Next one that I have for you has to do with what the 17th letter of the alphabet posted earlier tonight. And it was an excerpt from a chat room that was like a game chat room. And this article right here, I think, is where it originally came from. This is May 18th of 2017. Now remember, May of 2017, what was going on? Well, lots and lots of stuff. Now, the reason that I am using, you noticed up here, this is the archive, the, Wayback Machine thing here. And the reason for that is because this is what you get when you go to the actual website. So yeah, the website is pretty much just parked there, it looks like, and is not doing anything. So I don't know that this article was what caused them to be that way, but this article didn't stay up for very long. It did get taken down. But essentially, if you haven't heard, if you don't follow the 17th letter of the alphabet, what the claim is that these deep state players would use different game consoles, different types of gaming systems, and use the chats in them to communicate and make plans and everything else. And it was a way of bypassing, like, the NSA, different types of collection that they do. And so this particular one, it's supposedly by the person who gave it to them, was going by Fresh Camel, and it was posted on several dark web message boards. Now, the dark web, for those who may not know, I think pretty much everybody knows, but what you see when you go to websites like this, that's just kind of like the tip of the iceberg, and the dark web is everything else underneath, and it's huge, it's massive, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on there that most people who use the internet have no clue about, which is a good thing because some of it's not good at all. And so this particular identifier, Fresh Camel, there are some rumors that was Chelsea Manning. I don't know if that is or not, but then here's the document down here. If you read through this whole article, it's a good article. But here's what it was. This was a screenshot from this particular chat, and they were talking about RR, which we've come to know as Rod Rosenstein, and Mueller, and different things. Here's something with Turkey and Erdogan, and just MF, Mike Flynn. Yeah. This one says I'm in S, and that probably means I'm in Syria. At least that's what we're thinking. Most of the researchers are kind of been going over this and seeing what it is. But this is supposedly a conversation. What's really interesting is the researchers went through and, here's another possibility that it came from. Although it seems more like it came from here, this particular article first, and then that's where this person got it, but I don't know. I'll leave both links and you can read them. But here's what the researchers did. They went through and they made this little graphic here so you could understand some of what they're talking about, because here's the deal. On certain days, the chat was disabled in these games. And so what happened here? Look at this. This one was disabled June 28th of 2018. Well, look what else happened on June 28th of 2018. Kind of interesting. And then if you go over here to this one, look, the chat goes down again, April 20th of 2018. And what do we have here? Something else happened on April 20th, 2018. And then when you go back here, again, the chat goes down July 22nd, 2018. And look what happened on July 22nd, 2018. So just kind of interesting. This Star Wars commander here, you have to understand that that particular game has now posted that it will no longer be in effect. It's closing as of June 12th, 2020, and this was posted on March 13th, which I believe was the same day that our country was locked down. I can't say that 100% for sure, but I think that's about when it was. So, there's just a lot of connections here. There's a lot of things to look at this. And when you go through, it's like, that's very interesting. And then there was another one, another meme, and I'm sorry, I forgot to collect that one. But there was another one where it showed, according to this transcript, what was happening those days. So they do connect. There was an article, this is when Mueller was appointed, and like the next day, Mueller was appointed. And then there was that issue about Mike Flynn and Turkey and all of that, trying to set him up. And it just, things kind of connect in, I'm telling you. So I thought that was just very interesting. And even if you're not a follower of the 17th letter of the alphabet, it's okay. But you need to read this transcript here, because this is what they do. They use such things to be able to communicate. And what they were communicating was not good. Well, anyway, the researchers were researching one of the memes that the 17th letter of the alphabet posted tonight. And this one right here about the fired, all the different fired. And I looked at this and I thought, okay, well, there's a couple, the way it's read, it reads up here, fired meme file number leads to a YouTube channel with 2 videos. And I thought, well, gosh, if it's a YouTube channel and only has 2 videos, that sounds kind of odd. And they both are ones that this leads to. Well, that's not what it actually means. But if you go through here, it's just very interesting. There are 2 different videos that they point out. This first one is down here. Look at that. Does that look kind of familiar? Look, it's mine. So I was a little tickled to see that. I gotta tell you folks, I have done so many videos over the past couple years, over 600 videos, and I don't remember exactly what's in this one. It's a hodgepodge, I know that, of different headlines, but I know that part of it was about the FBI coup, and so I don't know what all is in there, but I'm going to go back and watch it again and see. And then this one right here. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. Like I said, I was really surprised. I'm going along here going, oh, let's look at this. And usually I right click and I pull it out and it's like, wait, that's my video. So yeah, anyway. And then I wanted to point this article out to you. 1/5 to half of all the deaths have been in nursing homes. This is really significant and we need to keep an eye on that. I think in Indiana it was 30%, somewhere right around there. And they have started putting that statistic on the Indiana website. So check out your state website, see what the deal is, because it does seem that there's a disproportionate amount. And I know for sure in New York, the law was sending people back to the nursing home even though they were positive. So I hope that's not happening in a lot of different nursing homes. I also listened to Ron DeSantis today because he was speaking with President Trump. And he was talking about their first focus when Florida became aware of what was going on. Their first focus was on the nursing homes. And that was the main thing that they tried to shore up, to make sure they were safe. And because of that, now they're ready to open their state, because they mitigated those deaths by being very careful with the people that were the most vulnerable. So I thought I'd leave that article for you. And then, in case you missed it, this particular video has been taken down from YouTube. So I'm going to put a link to it for the BitChute version of it. And you really need to check it out. Okay? Got a lot of very interesting information. And these guys are doctors and they know what they're talking about. But it doesn't align with the powers that be, so it was not approved. So anyway, that's what I've got for you on this one. I want to thank you for stopping by, and I'll see y'all later.